Hey folks, it's Nate. Welcome to Hot Takes and Cold Storage for June 5th, 2026. It's an episode full of open source this week. AI policy wars, legislative wins with a bit of an asterisk, and a supply chain security milestone that isn't really getting a lot of attention. First, you remember all that debate around age verification laws and Linux operating systems? We've got a little bit of a win here. California and Colorado carve Linux out of the age verification laws. Here's the win. Both states are exempting open source OSs from mandatory age bracket compliance requirements. So that's a good thing, right? But there's a catch. California's bill simultaneously expands age gating for browsers and the open web. So that's, on one side, a genuine win, and on the other side, handing some more of our rights back to the surveillance state. The EFF is not pleased, but it's not law yet. It's still in the Senate. All right, on to our next one. Flatpak's future might require systemd. This isn't exactly a crisis, but it's worth keeping an eye on. Flatpak's next proposed architecture leans heavily on systemd appd for sandboxing. This raises questions about long-term compatibility with non-systemd distros, and this came out of the Linux App Summit 2026. Now, for an architecture that is meant to be portable, it seems weird. This seems like a weird move. So I guess we'll just have to keep our eyes on it. I don't personally hate systemd, but I know there's a lot of distributions that don't run it, and you're pretty much limiting your install base if you start to require systemd. So I guess we'll have to keep an eye on this one. More Flatpak related news. So Flathub, which is the software repository that backs Flatpak, is banning all use of AI generated pretty much anything. Code, docs, build scripts, pull request text, all of it. This contributes to a huge fight that's happening in the open source world at the moment around AI generated code, and it's just going to get deeper in the deeper dive, so stay tuned. And Debian makes reproducible builds mandatory as of May 9th. Debian's migration tooling blocks any package that can't be reproduced bit for bit. Debian 14 Forky will be the first major general purpose distribution to mandate this. And as I'm reading, this sounds like it's a response to the XZ backdoor that happened, my gosh, is that a year ago now? I don't know, it's been a little bit. This is the community finally taking action instead of just talking about the problem. So I'd call this a win. As always, you can get more information about everything I just talked about in the notes for today's show. I've got links that back up each one of those stories. So if you want to go deeper, feel free. But we're going to get into our deep dive. All right, get ready for a deep dive down the rabbit hole, which is AI and agentic actions and vibe-coded harnesses, and a little bit about the open source community's response to AI-generated code. Have you heard of this little YouTuber? I don't think anybody's really heard of him. He's only got like 100 million subscribers or something like that. Yeah, his name's PewDiePie. I have to admit that up to this point, I don't think I've actually watched a single one of his videos, at least not on purpose, but I hear he's popular. Popular in a way that technical creators like myself just aren't, and maybe we never could be. So why am I talking about him? Well, at the end of May, he announced a little project, and it's kind of interesting. He's created a self-hosted AI workspace. No telemetry, runs on your own hardware, and he's released it as open source. He's got 30,000 stars on GitHub in only 2 days. Now, are those stars just programmed fanboys that are there to support their favorite YouTuber? I don't know. But here's what I do know. I've been doing my own local AI experimentation. I've talked about it a couple of times on this show and other things where I create content. But I'm doing it for a lot of the same reasons that PewDiePie outlines in the video where he announced this little project of his, which is called Odysseus, by the way. I have a local machine running in my home lab. It's a framework desktop. It's got one of the Ryzen AI chips in it, only 32 gig of memory. But it's not exactly a high-end model, but I bought it so that I could tinker with AI and dip my toes in and see what it's all about. It runs Ollama and LiteLLM and even the Open Web UI front end that comes out of OpenAI. This stuff all runs in containers. It uses the Open Web UI as a chat interface. LiteLLM is a proxy that proxies between whatever I point at it and Ollama, which is the backend that runs the actual models. It's neat, But it's no Claude Code. It's no ChatGPT. See, those services have two things that I kind of don't and may never have. A much larger pool of hardware that the AI models can draw from, and a slick UI that lets you tie in agents and tools and other things. You may have heard about OpenClaw a few months back, maybe not even months at this point, could be weeks, this space is moving so dang fast. It's a vibe-coded project that was churned out in a weekend, from what I understand, and it gives your LLM hands. And what I mean by hands is it lets it take actions in the digital world. You can do things like have it browse the web, have it buy stuff for you on Amazon. You can even give it a credit card so it can just go find the thing you're looking for and make a purchase for you. So basically, it lets it take actions and perform chained automations where it has to, make decisions and figure things out based on the question and then responses that it's getting from things that it's searching for on the internet. And I've been poking at OpenClaw too. I'll talk about more on that in just a minute. What Odysseus is, and man, that's a hard word to say. What Odysseus is that, but honestly, more. And what really sets this announcement apart from OpenClaw's announcement is the reach. Let me talk about that too. See, what PewDiePie just did was he took his message of self-hosting freedom and he gave it to a follower base of over 100 million people on YouTube. These are just general people who turn into this guy's channel, presumably because he plays video games or whatever. He just told them what digital self-reliance and digital advocacy proponents like myself have been trying to shout from the rooftops for years. Letting those big tech companies own your soul is bad, and you have the power to take it back. And I encourage you to actually go watch his video. He does take a stance here. He doesn't just show off a neat tool that he vibe coded. He actually tells you why he did it, and it was this exactly. He wants to take his life back from the Googles and the whatevers of the world. And I think that's actually, I kind of respect the guy a little bit for that. So I'll be looking into Odysseus as well. It looks pretty slick. As I mentioned just a little bit ago, this week I've been poking around at OpenClaw. My goal here has been to get it running locally. OpenClaw is also an open source AI harness, much like Odysseus. But most of the folks I've seen run it just tie it back into a public frontier model because there's obvious benefits there. You don't have to run your own hardware, and these things are super capable. But that comes with two things. First, the obvious, it costs money, and that cost could change at any moment. And you better believe it will. Lots of industry experts are saying that the era of cheap AI will come to an end. Token winter is coming. But there's a deeper concern from my perspective. Data. See, an AI agent works better when it has an understanding of you, your goals, your motivations, your interests. To me, that all sounds a whole lot like the data that social media companies are so hot to collect and sell. So when that token winter finally hits, or when these AI businesses inevitably shitify, what do you think they're going to do with that data? But back to my struggles with OpenClaw. I wanted to see if I could point OpenClaw at a local LLM. That is, run this thing 100% on my own systems, my own hardware. How useful could it actually be pointed at a LLM that's running on my little 32 gig framework desktop? Well, the build itself was pretty easy, but there's a lot to consider between models and context windows and other AI tunables that can leave you with a well-oiled machine or a horribly broken chat agent that talks itself in circles trying to carry out your task. And this is me doing nerd things, something I'm actually good at. Imagine an average Joe watched PewDiePie's video and then he tried to host his own local LLM with really no background at all. His intentions might be good, for all the same reasons that I listed and PewDiePie listed in his video, but we've already seen how this plays out. They wouldn't go to the extents that I've gone, that is 2 days of off and on troubleshooting this OpenClaw deployment and trying different models and trying different tunables. No, they'd use what's easy. And what's easy is plugging in a credit card into the web UI of some tech bros AI front end. What PewDiePie did here was show the world that some guy who started a gaming channel on YouTube can actually do this. And then he took what he built and he gave it back to them. And that's a good thing if you really think about it. This is how open source works. And if it gives a small fraction of his viewers the idea that they can take ownership of their digital life, I call it a win. I mean, that's the message I've been trying to tell people for years. But there's another side to the coin. And this makes me think twice about my little OpenClaw experiment. Vitalik Buterin, Buterin? I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I'm really sorry about that. But he's the founder of Ethereum. He wrote a detailed post about local AI and AI harnesses, like OpenClaw, back in April. And the article cited research showing that roughly 15% of community-built skills for OpenClaw contain malicious instructions. Not bugs leading to misuse, but directly malicious instructions. And security researchers demonstrated that parsing a malicious web page could fully compromise an OpenClaw instance. And what do you think happens to a fully compromised, artificially intelligent assistant that has access to your entire digital life? Not good things. His opinion on the matter was pretty harsh. The community around AI right now is pretty cavalier about security, and I think we've heard this story before. The space is moving pretty quickly, and no one really wants to get left behind. His response, though, wasn't to completely abandon the project. It was to build completely local and fully sandboxed, with a rule that nothing leaves his machine without a human sign-off, which is pretty much what I'm trying to build. But his point is that most people aren't going to do that. And as these tools become more accessible or more in the public eye, like when a big YouTuber announces his awesome AI tool, the gap between I own my AI and I can trust my AI is going to get a lot more important. Which brings me to the community side of all this. Because while local vibe-coded AI fraught with security holes is going mainstream, the traditional open source world is having a bit of a meltdown over AI-generated code. There is a little bit of irony there, because in most cases, these open source projects are the very foundations of these vibe-coded agents. And there is absolutely no consensus, like, at all. The Linux kernel, one project in my little lineup here, the Linux kernel has finally landed on a middle ground. AI tools are permitted, but every line of AI-generated code is legally and technically tied to the human who submitted it. There's a new tag, assisted by, to make the distinction clear. Torvald's take was basically a ban is pointless posturing. Bad actors aren't going to read the rules. It's better to focus on accountability than prohibition. I think I kind of like how Mr. Torvalds thinks. Similarly, the QEMU project had a blanket ban, and now they're proposing to allow AI assistance for mechanical changes, tests, documentation, and small bug fixes under 20 lines. The argument is that a blanket ban made sense when LLM output was complete garbage, but that's changing. So it sounds like that's a start of slow adoption to me. Flathub, on the other hand, as we mentioned earlier, complete hard ban, no exceptions. And projects like GNOME Shell extensions, Gentoo, and Aaron OS, A-E-R-Y-N-O-S, I don't know if that's how you pronounce that, are holding firm on full bans as well. So the kernel says accountability over prohibition, and then Flathub says zero tolerance. QEMU is moving to a middle ground, and nobody can agree on what the right path is. And the debate is very public, as you might expect. And if you're curious, here's my take. And being completely transparent here, my opinion on this has shifted several times already because of how quickly this space is moving. It's hard to say where the right answer actually lies. I honestly like the approach that the Linux kernel is taking. AI is a tool, and tools are going to be used. This tool happens to be, in my opinion, revolutionary, for better or worse. And I'm sure you've heard this phrase, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, especially when it references AI, because a lot of people are saying it. I think token winner is going to slow things down whenever it gets here, but it's impossible to stop AI adoption. If you'd asked me a year ago, I'd probably have been firmly in the look at this six-fingered lady camp. But go look today. These generative tools are getting genuinely better. And I mean, they are getting genuinely good. They write better, they create better, and to not use them as a tool is a mistake. As a tool, not as a replacement for human thought and human generation. Today, I leverage Claude to help me make this very show. It helps me hunt down articles, gives me sources and summaries, which then I can parse and review in my meat brain, and then I produce the script that I'm reading from right here. But that post from Vitalik, makes things a little bit complicated. That's about giving AI the providence to make design and engineering decisions. It's not just that function that you could have written in 35 minutes, but instead chose to let the AI assistant do it in 5 seconds. No, it's about handing the entire job off to AI and then just running it in prod because you don't understand the code that was just written. You don't even know how to review the code. When your agent can modify its own system prompt without even asking you, well, that seems like we're asking for trouble. The access question and the trust question are usually treated as distinct pieces of the software development chain. I think this week's news makes it clear that that's probably going to have to change. Maybe it's the speed of the industry, maybe it's laziness, I'm really not sure. But the open source community sure is figuring out in public whether that's an embarrassment or exactly how things are supposed to work. Well, I guess that's up to you and your interpretation. I think I know where I stand, though. All right, folks, thanks for tuning in for this week's episode of Hot Takes and Cold Storage. I hope you enjoyed the deep dive and, of course, the hot takes at the beginning. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment at the bottom, and I'll catch you in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.